Imagine what it would be like to be, um, closely related to somebody infamous, did a horrible thing, and you don't agree with them at all. Imagine what it would be like to be like the Unabomber's sister, or son or daughter of a serial killer. It sucks because the media is so stupid about this because they, you know, it's like that guilty by association thing. This person usually does not ever condone what their close family member did. Can you imagine that goes on inside of their psyche? The confusion that this was their sibling or their parent, or like this person that they thought they knew, oftentimes. Because sometimes they're not the person who's close to the criminal, evil doing person is not surprised by by what the person did, and other times they're outrightly shocked. Like the Green River Killer was a family man by day. Watched a program once, very vague memory of watching a program about the daughter of the Green River Killer, and how it had very sadly tainted her entire life. It really messed her up. She felt guilty for what her father did, and it was nothing to do with her. It sucks for family members who are often victims, whether they themselves were abused by that family member, that evil-doing family member, or they were not abused and were lied to about who that person was. Either way, different reactions, different experiences there, but either way, it sucks to carry the burden of just being connected to that person, especially because for some very interesting and odd reason, I find that there are some families that seem to go to extremes. The family members are like narcissistic and kind of sociopathic, or quirky, but on the other side of the pendulum, like highly sensitive. And it's really weird how that works. But people in the autistic community whose parents, they were raised by narcissists, they were raised by sociopathic narcissist parents. Either they were raised by like clueless NT parents who were well-meaning but didn't get them, or Aspie parents, and the third unlucky person is raised by that narcissist, sociopath personality type. Or, a genuine personality disorder, which sucks because then when we don't get diagnosed and helped and we try and go for psych help, we often get bullshit labels of personality disorder because of the combination of being damaged by our actually personality disordered parents and having poor superficial social role modeling in some of that, and of course the trauma itself. Anyway, bottom line is that it does suck when you are connected to evil and it unfairly gets projected into you in some way, whether society projects it, or the abuser person that you're related to somehow, who is an evildoer, projected it into you. Either way, it's kind of a form of psychic attacking. But of course, a lot of narcissistic types they will try and project into their partners and children, especially. Maybe not so much their siblings, depending on how close the relationship with the sibling and what kind of hold they have on the sibling. But that's a cornerstone of a person like that. That's a key feature of a person of that nature. It sucks because I heard something similar to this I don't remember where, but it said something like, narcissists smear you with their own shit. And in more couth terms, narcissists project their own traits onto you and convince you that you're it. I grew up with that. I came across that when I tried to stand up for myself amongst authority, in society, like amongst authority members that, were in positions of power, and those types of people in those jobs are often narcissists. The most punished I've ever been by the system was in a room with a psychiatrist when I took a stand for myself and autistic women. I told her she didn't know dick shit about autistic women, and I wasn't in the room for her to come and get off on taking my diagnosis away from me. Should have kept my mouth shut. Got hurt real bad for doing that, because you don't try to swing a sword at a narcissist, especially when they're the one with the machine gun, right? Anyway, I got off on a complete tangent. It does suck when you come across evil or are connected to it, and somehow along the way a psychic attack happens to you by that evildoer and evildoing, and you somehow are wounded and take on that poison. We're better than that. I'm better than that. You're better than that. The Green River Killer's daughter is better than that. The Unabomber's sister is better than that. Those poor people. We don't have to be like our family. I don't have to sell crappy. I don't have to be the type of person that sells lemon vehicles to people that are going to break down, or spends all my kids' money on casinos just because that's what I grew up with. I don't need to be the Wormwoods because I'm Matilda. But it sucks being in that helpless position of feeling like just because you're connected to something like that, some goony, evildoer, seedy kind of thing, that it's an unpleasant, yucky feeling to feel connected to that. And I think that anyone who is connected to that, I think there could be a metaphysical, spiritual reason / lesson that you can take out of it. Why am I put in the position of being connected with this or connected to this? What does this teach me? What good can come of this? What good can I make of this? I'm responsible for me. I'm not responsible for who constantly shoplifts. I was just using an example. To the second part of being connected with evil when you're not inherently evil, and that is if you actually did something evil in your past when you were hurting very badly or under the influence of drugs and alcohol and that type of thing, on some sort of antidepressant that changed you as a person. I can relate with that because I went through that for about a year. Was poisoned with an antidepressant that screwed me the hell up and made me not myself at all. This is why doctors shouldn't just throw antidepressants at kids. But anyway. Anyway, how do you contend with it? Now, it sucks when it's a double whammy, when you were raised by someone who was disordered and you're hurting. You might erroneously repeat their behavior. And what really sucks is that psych professionals are really poor at telling the difference between somebody who is the daughter of a narcissist or the son of a psychopath or a violent, a young impressionable person who was raised by an ass, a disordered person. I don't think it's fair to call that person disordered just yet. Psych professionals don't know how to tell the difference. They don't cut young people any slack when they should. And it's, well, sometimes they do, but they often don't. They jump to pathology, which isn't fair. It's also not fair to do even with full-grown people, because some people are more vulnerable to be impressionable, especially if they are on the spectrum. There's the autistic female battered wife, or battered wife, you know, if a woman is like suffering with FAS or some other developmental disability and is more, or has been abused by her own parents and is more prone to being abused by her husband. And psych professionals don't separate the wheat from the chaff in taking into account whether a person is victimizing or they're also a victim, being sort of psychologically controlled in a way. You know, there's a lot, if people were more compassionate about that kind of thing, I'm sure they could pick up on more in terms of things like human trafficking. And unfortunately, though, with psychological abuse, if a person is a full-grown adult, there isn't a lot that they can do, which sucks. But they can support a person to gain more insight if they were to actually be able to identify those traits in this person. Doing evil when you were under the influence or disturbed or upset. Did you hurt someone or snap and beat someone up? Or it's always a tragic situation when somebody kills their abuser. You know, when somebody is controlled and abused and they just internalize it too much and snap and kill their abuser, whether that be their parent or their spouse or partner. Very sad situation. Then that person has to live with not only being abused, but having done something terrible under the influence of being completely and utterly disturbed. I don't want to get into my past, and I don't want to specify anything, but what I will say is that I reflect on this because I can relate with some of it, being that in modern times, you know, recent times, when I'm trying to get help for my real health condition, I needed help, it gets worse. I was accused of being a total, like, pathological faker, doing things to myself, injuring myself, and blah, blah, blah. They're taking, you know, documents of behaviors that I did when I was a very upset teenager, a completely different person than I am today, and holding that against me now. I didn't do anything really bad, like whatever, but I just, they should have been helping me then, and instead they failed me. And they judged me instead of helping me when I was a scared kid, undiagnosed on the spectrum, being abused by several people, psychologically, emotionally, and sometimes physically. I was acting out, and they were cries for help, not just benign, pointless, pathological attention seeking without purpose. It was attention seeking, but it was like a cry for help, full on. Now I cry for help in a different way. Now the cry for help is like real physical need, whereas before it was more of an emotional cry for help. Anyway, bottom line is, you know, for a long time growing up with somebody who is disordered and does manipulate and lies and whatever, regardless of whether it's because they had their own really screwed up abusive childhood, which is, you know, may make it somewhat understandable, though can't let somebody completely off the hook. Anyway, the point is that regardless, growing up with that kind of person can make you feel like a bad person. And then when you reach out for Then when you act disturbed, society judges you further, and it's so brutal. There needs to be more studies and more done in terms of being able to tell the difference between somebody who is acting out of a place of disturbance because they're also a victim and an actual pathological psychopathic type. I don't know. I think the differences are pretty clear. The disturbed person's bark is usually much worse than their bite. Usually they're more self-harming. They don't harm others as much, and if they do, it's minor stuff. Striking out at someone once or twice, not like a calculated beating, or petty stuff like shoplifting or whatever, right? Like, it's sad when it's like the only thing the person knows and you're not even giving them the opportunity to have that insight and heal themselves and realize that they're a victim. I don't know. I'm lucky that I somehow have this internal wisdom and these these aspects of awareness in me and insight somewhere. I had some sort of friggin' Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder, because I sort of eventually realized in a series of epiphanies things for myself, but not everyone is as lucky, and I wasn't always lucky. I mean, some ways, sometimes I had to learn the hard way, and I had some really scary brushes with massive danger, but, you know, anyway, this has been a ramble, but of course that's the name of the series, isn't it? Finish because I'm not feeling so good anymore. My fuel has just about reached zero, so food for thought.